I'm the Lorax, and I speak for the trees. Actually, I'm Andy Jones, the...
If I had known you were going to say that, I would have changed your nameplate. It still says Andy Jones. I would have done the Lorax. It would have taken me 2 seconds, man.
I am actually Andy Jones, and tonight we are painting a nice little landscape of some trees. We are going to do this in a very impressionistic sort of abstract style, and I'm thrilled that I was able to surprise my cohort Stephen White tonight. So Stephen, it's a pleasure as always to have you with me for one of our Monday night paint nights. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, if you guys don't know who the Lorax is or what he looks like, just do yourself
it looks like me, but orange.
Open another tab, search the Lorax, and you'll be looking at a picture of Andy Jones in no time.
Yes. So anyway, I always like to try to have some fun little aspect of the painting that we're going to do. So tonight it is the Lorax, and we are painting some trees, and we are going to do most of our work tonight with our flexible metal blade palette knife. So I'm sure some of you just groaned audibly, and other people are like, yes! So we're going to be doing a lot with our palette knife, and we have a pretty limited palette tonight, and we are going to start mixing a color for our beautiful sky. So I'm going to put out some Dutch Aqua.
Now, before anybody asks, I'm going to go ahead and ask for them. Andy, what is your canvas sitting on?
Oh, yes. And as I got it ready today for tonight, I'm like, there will be questions about this. This is a wood canvas, and this happens to be a 12 by 12 wood canvas. And I have just put some loops of tape on the back of my 8 by 8 canvas and stuck it on there so that I can pick it up and hold it and paint to the edges of my canvas and not get paint all over me. So it's like my little handheld easel.
Gotcha.
Okay, and our canvas was painted with FolkArt black or licorice, whichever one you have, and it's dry, and I transferred just the bare minimum design with white transfer paper, and we are ready to go now. So I'm going to put out some true blue, and I'm also going to put out some titanium white. We have a very limited palette, so if you were wondering where the green colors were, we're going to mix those tonight. So we're going to put out some of this white.
Palette knife and color mixing, Andy.
I know, it's a lot.
Andy.
But we've still got just about an hour to get this done. So what I'm going to do is add a smidgen of true blue to this Dutch Aqua and mix that in. I didn't add enough. I can see that. But I want to give you pro tip or best practices is to always wipe your palette knife off after you've gone into your paint so that I can come back and pick up more true blue without contaminating this puddle of paint. All right, so we put a little bit more true blue in here. And you can use any color that's close to what I'm using. So it doesn't have to be the exact colors. If your painting is a little bit different than mine, that's perfectly all right, and not necessarily a bad thing at all. All right, so now that I've got this color here, I want to lighten it up a bit. So I'm just going to add a nice chunk of titanium white to that.
I would call that a nice chunk. That was a lot of white there.
It was,
yeah.
But ordinarily we would add our darker color to our lighter color. That's the best way to do it, but I didn't do that tonight.
Freestyling.
I am. And is freestyling what I'm really doing, Stephen?
I don't know. I think there's a method to your madness. It's not quite freestyling.
It's not quite freestyling, but it's nice that you thought of it that way. All right, so now I've got a nice sky blue color here. And what we're going to do, I am going to say this to you about, I don't know, we've got a good 50 minutes or more tonight, so I'll probably say it at least 50 times, if not more. You are not going to put much paint on your palette knife. Are we overhead?
I had you face on because it sounded important.
Well, it is important. Not much paint on your palette knife. And I don't know how to say that any clearer, but some will get it and some will not get it. Those that get it will love what they're doing. Those that don't get it will be like, I made a mess. And you haven't really made a mess. You've just done something a little differently. All right, so we can go back overhead, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of this blue on the back of the palette knife, and then I'm going to tap, tap, tap on the palette because I want to distribute and remove any excess paint that's on my palette knife. Now, I'm going to start kind of in the area where the tree branches are dipping down a little bit lower. So not at the edge, not next to the tree, but kind of in the middle. All right, do you see how I've just gotten this kind of spattering of color? It's not solid at all. And without picking up any more paint, I can come over here to this edge and I can rub around some more. Now, you can see I'm out of paint. There's no more paint on my palette knife. And that's all the paint that I got off of it. So, once again, stressing the words, not much paint. I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of paint on my palette knife, tap, 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 pat, pat, pat on the palette. And now that I've done a little practice run here, I know kind of how much paint I want. And I'm going to put a little bit more blue over here at this edge of the palette. And better to apply it multiple times. Just kind of scrubbing it on. We really do want this black to be visible in some areas. So keep picking up a small amount of paint and tap, 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 pat, pat, pat it off. And I'm just putting a little bit more on. And
do you still consider pat, 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 dab, dab, dab one of your catchphrases?
Yeah, of course it is.
Because, in the last, year, I'm not trying to call you out or anything. I'm not trying to put you in the hot seat. I've just heard you say it less,
Well, sometimes it depends on exactly what we're painting.
Because I know you won't just say it unless you're actually doing those things. You're not going to force it,
No, but we do a lot of tapping and dabbing, and it just really depends on what we are actually painting. All right, so I've got this nicely kind of sputtered on in there. And before we pick up our paintbrush to really do a little painting, I'm going to add a little bit more of this kind of sputtered effect, just going right across the tree trunks. And then I will pick up the paint, and I've got, I don't know, 3/4 inch flat brush here is going to be pretty good. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint next to our tree trunk here. And then I'm going to lay the brush parallel to the canvas surface and just kind of dab on this blue color. And if I don't fill in everything solid with the blue, that's good. But small amount of paint, and I'm laying the brush parallel to the surface of the canvas. And I do want to put a little bit more right over here, just so that that doesn't look like that edge was hard to cover with the palette knife, which it was.
We actually had a question about your palette knife just now.
Okay.
Madeline asked, what kind of palette knife are you using?
This is an RGM number 6 flexible blade metal palette knife. You can find that online. Just RGM metal palette knife, and the size and shape that I have is a number 6. All right, so picking up a little bit more of my blue, I am going to come to the right side of this tree trunk and fill it in. Or fill in the space between the tree trunks is actually what I'm doing. And then I just keep turning my canvas and I tap the flat edge of the brush next to the tree trunk and then just fill it in. I want you to notice that it's not completely solid. There's some little gaps in the paint. If you're working on yours and you fill it in completely solid and you don't have any gaps, not to worry. We can add some gaps if we need to. And again, we're laying our brush down parallel to the surface of the canvas and filling in next to the tree trunks. And I don't know what kind of tree trunks these are that are black, but I can tell you I've lost. I got to carefully watch what I'm doing here because I will paint my tree trunk instead of my sky if I don't pay attention. So there's the sky in between the tree trunk. Then I've got tree trunk here, and I think it looks like I've got a little bit of sky here. Tree trunk. I think this will be sky and tree trunk. It doesn't really matter, but you need to try to have alternating tree trunks and areas of sky peeking through the little forest there.
So, Andy, we've kind of made references to this already, but the title of this painting is obviously a reference to the Lorax.
Yes.
Would you consider painting the Lorax into this painting, or is he sort of here through the energy of the forest? You know,
He's the energy of the forest. Yes, he's not physically here, because these trees are alive and in good shape. We don't see the Lorax until there's a problem. And of course, we know there was a problem with the Lorax. The statue at Dr. Seuss's house had a bronze Lorax statue, and it was stolen. But rest easy, everyone. The statue was recovered. All right, so over here in this area, which would look like a gigantic tree trunk, I'm going to put a little bit of blue over here, very small amount. Tap, 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 pat, 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 get that excess off. And we're just putting a little blue on there. We'll make less blue in just a little while. But all right, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to work on your sky, and I'm going to dry mine really quickly.
So, Andy, we're painting on a black canvas. What did you use to trace the picture with? Did you use chalk?
I actually did use some chalk on the back of my pattern, but you could easily use white transfer paper.
Gotcha.
That doesn't matter. Either way is perfectly acceptable. All right, so you can do two things now. I am pretty happy with the coverage that I have of my sky color. If you don't love your sky and you think there's too much black showing through, you can take your paintbrush and you could come back and dab or stroke on some additional blue here and there if you think it's just not enough coverage for you.
You didn't ask me how I felt about the level of coverage on your sky color.
I'm sorry, I didn't mainly because I don't care. Sorry about that, Stephen.
Well, the answer was that I'm good with it.
Okay, I thought you would be, but it really hadn't entered my mind as to your preference of the coverage there.
I'm here too.
You are, and I'm thrilled and thankful that you are. All right, so I'm leaving that alone, and I'm going to dry it again. So if you felt like you needed to add more, which Stephen and I obviously did not think we really needed to, but we're going to dry it again. Now, some of you may want to fancy your painting up a little bit. This is not what I did on the original, but I'm going to show you that I could take this blue color and I could brush mix a little bit of white into it. Take most of the paint off my brush, and I could lay on a little extra fancy white into it, and I'll show you what that looks like on there.
That is fancy white.
It is fancy, or it's really fancy light blue. All right, so you could see that I've added a little, doesn't really show up very much because I don't want it to be the star of the show. All right, so we're going to leave our sky alone, and we are going to make a light orange color. So I'm going to start with a little bit of pure orange.
Do I need to get you a new bottle?
I wish I had a new bottle, but I've got a lot of other colors, but not a lot of pure orange.
Okay.
But I've got some medium yellow here. For what we're painting, this is like enough to do 6 of these paintings.
Okay.
We've got plenty of that. So we're going to put out some medium yellow. And what I'm going to do is take a little chunk of pure orange and add a chunk of medium yellow to that. I want this to be more orange than yellow, but lighter than pure orange. Okay, now cleaning my palette knife off again, and I'm going to add a small amount of white to this, and I'm probably just going to add it to one corner of this to see how my color looks. And that looks a little too light, so I'm going to add a bit more orange in there. And I'm going to mix it all in. Just like Vegas, we're going all in. Actually, which in all my times in Las Vegas, I have never gone all in on anything.
Good for you, man.
Usually when I've gone to Vegas, I've like allotted myself like maybe $50 to gamble with. And when that's gone, that's it.
It's time to quit.
There have been a number of trips where a friend of mine would come out and join me for part of my stay in Las Vegas, and we ate very, very well because we would play the slots until we had, you know, like won, I don't know, $500 or $600, and then we would cash out and go to eat.
There you go.
And so we enjoyed our time there and ate very well off of our slot winnings. Okay, we are going to add orange flowers to our meadow, and I'm going to do that by first picking up some pure orange on my palette knife and tap, 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 dab, dab, dab on my palette, and then pick up a little of my lighter orange mixture, tap, 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 dab, dab, dab. So we've got 2 colors blended on the palette knife at once.
Andy, I think we have a lot of fans of the color palette that you've picked today. We've got comments saying that they love the fancy white flourish you did.
Okay.
Comments talking about how the colors are very beautiful. They like this tangerine that you've mixed up.
That's a very good description of this color. So up here at the top edge of the meadow, I'm going to set my palette knife down and just push and pull a little bit of this tangerine right up here at the top edge of the meadow. So it looks a little something like that. It's broken up at the top edge, so it's not a harsh line there. See how close I can get this to the camera. There you go.
Macro.
Yep, so there you can see exactly what that looks like. And we will put a little bit more of this lighter tangerine color just a little bit below that. And then we'll take that same kind of coloration there, and we'll put a little bit more of that down here in the bottom. All right, so that is setting the stage for our little bit of orange flowers that are going to show through in a minute. But let's clean off our palette knife, and I'll give you a moment to work on your orange areas, and I will dry mine.
What would you call these little, this isn't a question anybody asked, this is just me.
Okay.
These little spots of orange, like the shape that they end up.
The shape, they're just random shapes.
Yeah, but if you had to have a word for it, what would you call it?
Kind of blotches.
Blotches?
Yeah, I mean, they're just random areas, random shapes. They're
That's
not.
a good description.
Yeah, if you try to make them something, then you're worrying way too much about them. They're just little areas of orange, and we're going to cover 98% of that up. And what are we going to cover it up with? Beautiful two-tone grass. But we're going to start with two-tone green in our trees. So the best way to make a nice toned down green color is with yellow and black. So I have a big chunk of medium yellow here. And it's not that I'm going to be burning through all of this, but I'd rather mix up one batch than to need more. And then careful with the amount of black that you add to this puddle of yellow. Because right now I'm making this lighter green color. So I've got dark green and light green. So I'm making the lighter green, And this takes me way back to my very early days of painting when we mixed our own green from yellow and black. And we mixed a few different values of a green so that we could paint beautiful leaves with it. All right, so I need to add a little bit more black because that's still too yellow. Better to add little bits of black than to add a whole bunch of black, and instead of a pile of green, you will have a pile of black, and we don't want that. All right, so let's get it all mixed in there so we don't have any surprises when we go to paint. And I want to just check one thing real quick. So I'm checking my color, and I think I want to add a very small amount of white to this. Not much, but just a little bit of white, just to kind of soften that green a little bit. And again, if you don't have medium yellow, if you have sunny yellow or daffodil yellow or school bus yellow or moon yellow or any yellow, it will give you a shade of green, and it doesn't have to be anything like what I'm using. So everybody's painting can be a little bit different just by the color of yellow that you are using to make your green mixture. All right, so I'm going to check this again against the color. That's going to be pretty close. So I'm happy enough with that that I will move on. And so I'm going to take a bit of this color and I'm going to add some black to that. So this is going to be my lighter green, and I'm making a darker green now by adding more black. That may have been way too much black. No, it's going to be okay. Whew, I was like, I'm going to have to go back and remix everything. And folks, I do that all the time. You all get to see the prettier things that I paint, and I have the luxury of never showing anyone something that's hideous or horrible that I do, but one of my mentors was talking to me about doing a bad painting, and she's like, you're going to leave 100 miles of bad canvases behind you. And I'm like, okay, so we are often on our way toward adding another mile to that.
I'm glad you said that, because we just had a comment that says, I love that Andy can keep his palette so orderly.
Well, Andy's been doing this for a very long time. And while the world around me can be in complete chaos, my palette and usually what I'm painting is very, very neat and orderly. Now, if there's a flat surface near me and it's piled up with stuff and it's cascading all over the place, that won't bother me at all. But a messy palette or paint on my hands and I'm coming unhinged. All right, so we're going to start with our dark green color. And I'm tapping and loading my palette knife with not too much paint. If you get nothing else out of tonight's lesson, learning to load your palette knife properly will make this sort of painting much easier for you. So I'm not going to start right at the edge where I want this to be very kind of broken up and lacy at the edge. I'm going to start in a little bit. And you can see that when I put that color on, it's very, very broken up. That's because I don't have too much paint. Let me show you what happens when you have too much paint on your palette knife. That's what you get. You get a big, solid mass of paint. And that's okay if that's what.
Not a blotch.
Huh?
That's not a blotch.
It's an unattractive way to apply paint. So if that's what you're looking for, that's great. But if you want something a little bit more ethereal, then you need less paint. So I'm stretching that out, and I'm going to continue to load with a sparse amount of paint and just move that where I need it to go. It doesn't matter if some of it's going to be solid, but some of it should not be solid. And I'm moving this down around the top of those tree trunks, and I will show you up close what it looks like. but it is broken edges. I'm always afraid I'm about to get paint on some of this equipment. All right, so you could see how those edges are broken and spotted and not solid. If you can see that, please say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Sometimes I look at the monitor and I'm like, well, I can see that perfectly well. I don't know what anybody else is seeing on their monitor. So I ask.
Well, you finally asked me on my opinion for once.
I've asked your opinion more than once. For those who may not know, we are simulcasting. Is that the right word?
Yeah, that'll
Okay.
work.
We're simulcasting on YouTube and the Plaid Crafts Facebook page. On YouTube, we have a series called Art Talk. And Stephen was one of my special guests. And Stephen, who doesn't really have that much interest in painting, he's creative in many other ways, agreed to come on the show or the series, and we actually painted a sunflower painting together. And he did even then comment on how his palette looked chaotic and mine looked very neat and orderly.
Yeah, you said that paint on the hands and a messy palette are two things that you can't deal with while painting, and I think those were the two immediate things that I did while painting.
Well, that's okay. And that really was about Stephen's first lesson in how to paint, and he was quite the good sport about that. So you can go to YouTube and watch Stephen and I painting sunflowers.
Shameless plug, we also released an episode today
Yes.
of painting a chicken.
Yes, we
And this-
did.
This was one of my favorite episodes to work on. This was a fun one. So if you like painting chickens or farm animals in general, check it out.
It's pretty good, I have to say.
It's a good episode.
All right, so we've got our dark area of our trees done, so I'll give you a moment to get that applied. And you can see there's more black areas showing here than there probably was on the original painting, but that's perfectly fine with me. I'm not out to recreate this painting. I'm out to give you a good representation of how I did it. So do we have any other questions?
I don't think we have any other questions. People are saying they appreciate the close-ups. We have requests for me to join a live at some point and paint with you. We got to run that one up the chain, actually.
Yes, that's
not for us
usually
to
not
determine.
how we do things. But if probably if enough people comment and write in and email, then something will happen.
You guys will have to blow it up for it to happen. And we have people saying that they love Art Talk. Madeline did the sunflower and the lemon.
Oh, very good.
It's very cool to hear. Thank you for letting us know.
We love that you all are watching that. All right, so I'm thinking that it is just about time to move on from the dark green on the trees, and we're going to start the dark green here in our meadow. So once again, loading that palette knife and then tapping and patting so that we don't have too much paint on there. And I'm going to, so you can see on here, we've got this kind of diagonal line of light green, so I need to make sure that my dark green kind of follows that same diagonal. So picking up a little bit of paint, not too much, and you see how I'm just bringing that right over that orange, and you can see little bits of orange here and there, and we're leaving some little areas of black showing through. And again, just tapping, patting, picking up a small amount of paint, and then applying it with the palette knife absolutely flat on the canvas. Once you get this technique and you can do it consistently, it's very, very fun and very easy to create this kind of mark on your canvas. And this is something that you simply can't get with a paintbrush. It's a totally different looking mark, and I think it's a lot of fun.
All these techniques, and it's not even Tuesday, Andy. What are you saving for tomorrow for lunch and learn?
Tomorrow it's going to be all about color trends for our Lunch and Learn in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group tomorrow. All right, so you could see how we've got our green on there at the bottom. I might make it a little bit more solid, just because it looks like I had it a bit more solid on this one. So to make it more solid, I either pick up a little bit more paint or I just keep applying a small amount of paint to the same area. Okay, so we've cleaned off our palette knife over there. All right, so that's what our painting looks like right now. Dark green on there, and we are going to dry it. Dry your trees and your meadow. Okay, now everything's all nice and dry. And we're going to wipe and clean off our palette knife. And we're now going to begin to apply some of our light green. And I think we'll just start up in the tree area because we've been starting in the tree. So pick that light color up, tap, 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 pat, pat, pat. Not much paint. And I'm going to just start on the tree again, loading my palette knife over and over and over with a small amount of paint. And you don't want to make a career out of this. We're putting some color on, and the most important parts are like right around this kind of outside edge. And then we're going to do a little something different in the tree. Well, it's not really different. It's the same thing we did in the sky, but we're going to do it in green. All right, I probably would just continue with my palette knife, but I know some of you, it's a bridge too far and you're ready for a paintbrush in your hand again. So I'm going to take the brush that I had the sky color in, and I'm going to pick up some of my light green color, and I'm going to lay the brush down and kind of fill in a little bit more. I'm going to try to leave a couple of little areas of black showing here and there, but we're filling in a good bit of this. Okay, that is the light part of the tree done. So you can work on that, and I'll go ahead and dry mine. And I'll just give you a minute to catch your breath and finish your little bit of your trees. Notice that there's a good amount of dark left down at the bottom and over here on the right. If you think your trees need to be lighter, you can put a little bit more light color on there. I saw no need for that.
I didn't either.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move on. This is very different than being able to see what everybody's doing, but if people are not ready, they will, I'm sure, let you know pretty quickly.
They'll yell at me.
Yeah.
I'll take the brunt of it.
Okay.
And you'll see nothing.
All right. So I'm assuming that we're ready to move on because it's time to do the top part of our little meadow. So I'm going to lay my palette knife down right at the edge and make sure that we have kind of a little bit of a broken line. Doesn't have to be completely broken, but you know, let's not have it be very solid, and a complete line is not what we're after. All right, now we're going to continue this. I'm going to start right over here at the edge of the canvas, and we are going to bring this down in kind of a diagonal line. Starting over here at this edge, and then some of it can come across those orange flowers that we've put on there. And we continue to pick up a little bit more paint, take most of it off, and then we're kind of skimming this on our meadow. And for fun, I can pick up a little extra paint on one edge of the palette knife, and I can come in there and make a bit of a solid line or a sharp line there. That is just a way to create some visual interest on this painting. If there's one thing you don't want your painting to be, is boring for someone to look at it. Your painting always should have something to make the viewer want to look at it again, or look at it a little while longer, or wonder how you did something. I think that's, I've had people who have been to my house and looked at the artwork that's around there, and they're always like, well, you don't have very many of your paintings up. And I'm like, I know how I painted them, and they are not interesting for me to look at. There's no mystery to them. So I like a painting that gives me something to wonder about how the artist did that, or did they do that with a brush, or what kind of brush, and how did they put that on there. All right, so you could see we're filling in a little bit more solidly. And we're just taking our light green color and applying it. Then we can do the same thing we did up in the trees, and like we did in the sky. I'm going to lay my brush down and begin to fill in this meadow a little bit more with more of that light green color. And as you can see, I'm starting to run out of green. No, say it isn't so, but it is so. I'm going to have to brush mix a little yellow and a smidgen of black, which that was no smidgen of black there. So making my lighter green color, taking some of that excess off of my brush, and we're back in business. So don't think that everything has to be exactly the same color. We've got a little bit of color variation going on here, and that's perfectly fine. I think, in fact, it's probably a bit more interesting All right, so I need more green on here, as I really don't want this to look like a black meadow. I think I'm going to be okay with that. All right, so that's what my meadow looks like. And you can see there is some variation of green in there. And so I'm going to dry the trees and the meadow at this point. Okay, now let's change gears completely for just a minute. And I'm going to take, I think, try to decide what size brush I'm going to use. All right, I'm going to take my number 8 flat brush and some black. And all I want to do is to come back and clean up my tree trunks a little bit. So where my tree trunks got a little full of blue, I'm simply going to paint them black. So go ahead and paint along with me, filling in your tree trunks with black. If you leave a little bit of blue here and there, that's going to be fine, but we are looking for more black than blue. Okay, and I'm not sure what I was doing back over here, but I'm going to just cover up a section of this little area that I painted blue. I'm going to just make a tree trunk right back here. And I'm not really going to fuss with it much. Just imagining where a big tree trunk would be back there. And there we've made another tree trunk back there. So we've got some crisp lines on either side there breaking up that blue. That's really what I was accomplishing back there. So that's what my tree trunks look like right now. I'll give you a moment to work on those. And then we don't have much left to do. Does everybody seem to be doing okay, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, well, we'll give people a minute more because that was, for some people, that's going to take a little time to figure out where their tree trunks were going. And while people are finishing that up, I'm going to just make another little pile of light green, which is medium yellow plus a little bit of pure black or licorice. And to this, I'm going to add a little bit of white. And if you've got a color that is close to this, you could go ahead and squirt that color right out on your palette and use that if you wanted to. I've never minded mixing colors because when I started to paint, that was what we did for everything. I'm adding a little bit more yellow to this because I want this to be a little bit more yellowy. What?
You really just told them, back in my day, we didn't have
Well,
alizarin crimson.
when I started to paint, our classes started out, it was a 6-week long session of classes, and we had 12 colors, and we mixed everything from those 12 colors. So I mean, I'm a dinosaur, no shame in my game.
And you walked uphill.
To school in the snow, both directions,
Both ways.
Absolutely. I did, when I was in elementary school, we did walk to school. It was not terribly uphill, but we did walk to school. All right, so I'm taking some of this green, and I'm loading it up on my palette knife, and I'm going to put a little bit up here on the trees, and I want to see, it's not quite light enough. It's barely showing up, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow and a little bit more white. going to need more yellow. We want to keep this more yellowy than chalky. All right, so taking most of the paint off of my palette knife, I'm going to pick up a little bit of this color and we're going to put it on the tree. Okay, you can see that we've got a lighter green color going on now. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a few little marks on the tree.
Andy, you're gonna kill me, but you got to bring your palette up a little bit.
I know. When I got that where it was comfortable, I'm like, okay, now I'm off screen.
Well, yeah, at least show them what you just did.
There we go.
If you got to do it like
I
that.
do. Sorry. So here we go. Little bit of extra paint on the palette knife, and I put a little swipe going that way, and I move down there and put another little swipe on. So you could see those two little swipes there. And I'm going to do a little bit of a swipey right down here at the top of the meadow. All right, so that's what I've done with that lighter color. I'm going to set my palette knife down, and I could pick up a number 12 flat brush and some of this lighter green color that we've made, and I might want to add a little bit of yellow just to make that a bit more yellowy. And
Yeah,
I don't,
you might.
Hmm?
I said you might.
I think I do. So it's not quite the same color we just had. And we are going to add some bold stroke work to our tree. And some of you will like this and some of you will be like, I don't get what that is. I don't want that. It doesn't look right. But I'm going to put a few little marks, literally just brush strokes.
I'm going to plug our newest Art Talk episode again. This technique that Andy is doing right now, we do a lot of in that episode.
Yes.
So if you're into this sort of touch and drag move that Andy's got going on.
It is what I would, in real fancy art terms, call bold brushwork. So that's what we're doing, is putting some bold brushwork on here. And let's come back here and be really brave and put one on there. They're just dabs of color. We're not trying to be anything. We're not showing off. We're putting some color on there, little pieces of color, and I've made this even lighter with more yellow and white, and I can come back and put a brighter little dab on. I'm going to do the same thing here at the edge of the meadow. I'm simply touching the brush down and giving it a little pull. Just touch and pull. Creating these little marks. They're not anything, they're not supposed to be anything, and they don't represent anything. They're little pieces of color. And back here, I'm going to add a few.
We had a comment that says, I love how your screen is all vibrant and perfect and my palette is destroyed.
Well, I mean, this is not perfect, but we're maintaining neatness where we can. All right, so that is the little dashes and dabs that I'm adding here. And it's easy to get carried away and you think you need to put a few here and a few here and a few more. And before you know it, you've just got a polka dot painting, and that's not what we're after. So two last things to do before we are done with our beautiful little landscape. And so I'm wiping out my number 12 flat brush, and I'm going to pick up some of my dark green color, which is almost dried out here. So I'm brush mixing a dark green with some medium yellow and a little bit of black. And I'm going to take this dark green color and I'm going to put a little bit of it on some of my tree trunks. I'm just dabbing a little bit of the dark green on, and I will move this up so that you can see exactly what I'm doing.
Andy, I have a question,
Okay.
but it's not for you, it's for me.
Okay.
So I'd like to go ahead and take the time to address this.
Sure.
It's now the Steven show.
Okay.
Wendy asks, so Steven, now that you did such a great job with the sunflower, have you gotten the itch to paint again? that was my favorite Art Talk episode so far. Wendy, thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback on the series. Everybody here at Plaid is super excited about Art Talk. We love making it. We love editing it. I know Dylan and I are really grateful that we have this new series. Have I gotten the itch to paint again? You know what? Right about now, I do have the itch to paint again. I'm watching Andy here.
But of course, we're almost
Oh,
at
shoot.
the end.
Oh, man,
You,
Wendy.
you can't drag out your paint, Stephen.
Wendy, if you had asked that question 20 minutes earlier, I might have had time, but next time.
All right. So while Stephen is just forcing the urge to paint, he's suppressing that urge, I'm picking up a little bit of my light green, and I'm going to put a few marks of that on the tree trunks. And I want you to see, I'm leaving some space. I'm not putting the same amount of light green mark on the tree trunks, and they don't go in the same spots. All right, so there you can see there's little bits of light green on the tree trunks. And just for fun, I will put a little light green out there.
Show them what you just did, because
I just did this little bit right there.
nice. I like that detail. I know we're not supposed to put, names to things, but it makes me think it's like moss growing up the side of the tree.
Well, I mean, you can think of it as that, but let's not try to paint realistic moss. Just a dab of green is all we're dealing with here.
Good deal.
There's an artist named Sergei Bongart, and he's an impressionistic painter. And there's a passage in his book when he's relating that someone asked him what makes a good painting. And his response was, the right color and the right spot, the right size.
I love that.
That's all it takes. And I'm like, that's the hardest thing. But you don't want to try to make these marks something. They're simply little bits of color, and that's all they need to be. So this is our little painting of our trees. I'm not adding, I put my brush down, and I am going to put all of the brushes in water so I will be not tempted to use them again. But this is how we painted our little tree, our little trees in our meadow. And it's really a very impressionistic study of trees. We're not painting anything with any sort of nod to realism or detail. It is literally just applying the right color in the right spot. So, Stephen, do we have any last-minute Lucy's with questions?
Oh, man. I don't think we have any last-minute questions, but I know that we had lots of people on both YouTube and Facebook painting along with us.
Very good.
Actually, Louise wanted to know if you can show a close-up one more time.
I certainly can. And I want to let people know that if you are following the Let's Paint program online, please post a picture of your finished painting with the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge. No apostrophe and no spaces between the words. And I want to let you know, because many of you will be wondering what we're doing next Monday. And we're not doing next Monday.
What?
I know. We're doing next Thursday with the Paint Night Live, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep.
And that is on the...
I'm sorry.
Is it the Plaid Crafts Facebook page?
Okay, now that I know what you're asking me.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes,
It
okay.
will be on the Plaid Crafts Facebook page. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it'll be on YouTube, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Usually I can't remember where anything is except for what I am responsible for. But we will have an image of that project up for you next week to see what it is. And we encourage you to join us on Monday nights, except the first week of the month when we do that on Thursday night.
Yep.
So first Thursday of the month is Paint Night Live. Then we revert to our Monday night classes. And we have Lunch and Learn on Tuesday and Thursday in the Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook.
Tomorrow's Tuesday.
Tomorrow is Tuesday.
Are you telling me there's Lunch and Learn happening tomorrow?
There is a Lunch and Learn
At the
happening.
Let's Paint with Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group?
Yes, that's when it is.
Wow.
And it happens every Tuesday and Thursday.
Andy, will you be there, and will Chris Williams be there?
Andy will be there. Chris Williams will not be there. She is
Oh,
taking
man.
care of some family business.
Well, maybe I'll be there.
Maybe you will.
Okay.
I hope so. Love having you around.
Well, I'll be there. Sounds like a date.
Okay, so we are on for tomorrow at noon, but again, want to thank you for joining us this evening, and thanks for painting along with us, and we look forward to seeing lots of your trees. And remember the Lorax and save the trees.
You can too.
Yes, unless.
Unless.
That's what's on the statue. Unless you care,
Oh.
we'll lose all the trees.
This is what we talked about earlier. I haven't seen the movie
Yes.
or read the book.
Well, anyway, lots of people I know that are my age absolutely read the Lorax. All right, so thanks everybody. We'll see you.